panel members, I would like you to just come up straight up and I'll read your bio while you're walking. Anne Marie Hertl began working with the Michigan League of Conservation Voters during the spring of 2017 as the West Michigan Regional Coordinator and brings her leadership and passion to engagement and organizing efforts in West Michigan. Chris Kolb has spent his career defending natural resources, public health, and civil rights as an advocate and elected official at the state and local levels. He is president of the Michigan Environmental Council and serves as co-chair of Governor Snyder's Environmental Justice Work Group. Guy Williams is president of Detroiters Working for Environmental Justice and principal and founder of G.O. Williams and Associates, LLC, strategic advisors for sustainable community and environmentally related programs. He is the chair emeritus of the Great Lakes Leadership Academy Board of Governors and serves on the advisory board for urban responses to environmental stressors and the Great Lakes Integrated Sciences and Assessment Center. Jeremy DeRoo is environmental director of LINC Up, a community revitalization, racial equity, economic and real estate development, advocacy, and engagement organization in Grand Rapids. He has helped to build a diverse team of employees and address issues of systemic racialization in Grand Rapids. Under his tenure at LINC Up, the organization has helped secure over $75 million for community improvement efforts. Kaushik Nag is Director of Employee Engagement for Amway and is responsible for leading and managing talent acquisition, global change management, employee benefits, and wellness. He is a state-appointed commissioner on the Michigan Asian Pacific American Affairs Commission, as well as a member of Governor Rick Snyder's Environmental Justice Work Group. And Chad Rogers has worked for the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality for 17 years. He currently serves as pollution prevention specialist. He works with businesses, communities, and NGOs to improve their environmental performance through pollution prevention and triple bottom line sustainability. Welcome, everybody.
How's that? Can you hear me back there? Okay. Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate that introduction. So I'm Chad Rogers with the Department of Environmental Quality, and I just want to appreciate your group. We have a great partnership. We've worked on many projects together, and I think it's great that we're having this conversation today. I think environmental justice, we'll all agree, is a wicked problem that we really need to engage with and discuss more often. So with that, I think we'll just get right to some questions. We have a couple prepared questions, and then we'll take some audience questions at the end. And I think we might run a little long. Right, Dan? I lost Dan. Okay. Okay, 5 minutes long, maybe. Okay. So first, we're going to start off with the panel and give you all a chance to introduce yourselves and talk about your experiences working on environmental justice in your local communities and organizations. And I also wanted you to talk about, number one, if you can, kind of what does environmental justice in your words mean? How do you define it, your working definition? And what are some of the key concerns you found trying to work in that space? And I guess we'll just start on this end. Anne Marie.
We're going to go way more over if you want me to answer all those things.
Briefly.
All right, so intro, definition, and key concerns. So thank you to the forum for the invitation to sit on the panel. Thank you to all the other panelists. Great to see a lot of you guys. Thanks, Chad, for bringing us all together. I'm one of those people that Sarah mentioned earlier during Dave's introduction, which is I went from the idealistic young person and chose activism instead of industry. Hopefully, though, I'm not chastising too many of you too often, and see a lot of really rich partnerships and opportunity to work alongside the business community through an activism lens. So, just a snapshot there. I do, however, find a lot of energy. I grow a lot of energy from working with community and community members. So that's certainly something that drives me. I do consider myself someone who's worked in environmental organizations, trying to understand how to increase inclusion, increase equitable outcomes by working alongside and being led by environmental frontline activists. We see a lot more success stories or a lot more examples that have been doing a lot longer in places like Detroit and Flint. However, an interesting kind of a turn of events that has been happening recently in Michigan are groups like Plainfield and Rockford, who are predominantly white, more affluent communities that are also experiencing not having a lack of access to drinking water. Similarly, in solidarity with even Republicans, right? In solidarity with our neighbors in Detroit and Flint. So we're certainly seeing that environmental justice in Michigan is impacting a lot more communities than just our east side of the state friends. It's places all over the state now don't have access to clean drinking water. And we're a Great Lakes state. There's obviously problems here that we can to work on. I will just also, in a moment say that, sustainability, environmentalism, environmental justice, from the outside world, if you're not in it, we're all one big movement, right? But those of you who have been following these movements for some time know that there are distinctions on who your partners generally are, what your goals generally look like, even what timeline those goals even cover. So as we walk through this, I'd just like to encourage that you don't have to become an environmental justice frontline activist to support the movement and to work alongside those activists. And like I'm sure that we'll talk about later, how do you work alongside with and be led by instead?
Thank you, Anne. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kaushik Nag, and Chad has already introduced me. So I'd like to keep it brief. A lot of work that I do outside of my day job with Amway is working with the Asian communities, community members. As you know, there are 28 different countries that are part of the Asian coalition at a state level. And the commission that I represent, the commission that I'm on, a lot of times the major concerns are they don't have a voice. They are, being part of the minority community, a lot of refugees, a lot of new immigrants. They do not know who to go to, who to approach if they have an issue or a problem. Healthcare is a big problem. If they run into issues related to environmental justice, they don't exactly know which state agency, what organizations, which people they should be going to. Other than that, they do not, like I mentioned, they do not have a voice. So from a policy point of view, there is very little that they can do. So our goal as a part of that commission is to ensure that we understand what are some of their biggest issues and concerns, and then find ways through which we are able to get them those resources, make sure their voice is heard at a state level, at a local level, regional level. And from an environmental justice point of view, which was the other part of Chad's question, we want to make sure that because of the lack of awareness of how this might impact them, a lot of times they don't even know that it's impacting them. And because they don't know it is impacting them, they don't have representation, there's very little that they can do. So our goal is to not only hear from them, but also to educate and teach them as to how this might impact and what are some of the things that they might be able to do. So that's what I typically spend a lot of time doing or working with them on. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Guy Williams, and thanks for the introductions earlier, Sarah and Chad. Good to see you again. Real quick, I just want to say a couple of things about my organization, Detroiters Working for Environmental Justice, and our fairly new subsidiary construction company called Future Build Construction Group. That's the shirt I'm wearing today. We are the original EJ organization in Michigan. We got formed in 1994. I just happened to be an original member, though it wasn't always my day job, so I've been at this for quite a while. And you may see, hopefully, on your table something that looks like this. And one reason we've passed it out is because we want to help people see in the voices of the originators of the domestic EJ movement, what does it really mean? What's the platform, if you will? So these principles of environmental justice were established in '91, excuse me, and they still are very vibrant and active for advocates like myself. I took the liberty of highlighting 4 of them in yellow that I thought were particularly relevant to the group here. And just a footnote, many years ago, I was president of your sister organization, the Southeast Michigan Sustainable Business Forum. So you do have a very kindred spirit, and along the lines of what Anna Marie was pointing out, there are a lot of ways to get at solutions, a lot of methods and tools and philosophies. And I believe in trying to bring together the best of all of those. So I'm hoping that this can be a tool to help you see common ground around your work and the aspirations of environmental justice leaders and activists. And I also have a few copies if anyone is nerdy enough to want a whole report out of our EJ work plan that we recommend it to the governor. And I think that's really the main theme of our talk today. So I'll hold off on that for now. Here you are, Chris.
Thank you, Guy. Got two. Hey, you can choose. I'm Chris Kolb. I'm the president and CEO of the Michigan Environmental Council. We were created 38 years ago to be the eyes, ears, and collective voice of the environmental community in the state capitol, working mostly on statewide policy, but also regionally and locally as well, including staff in Traverse City and also in the city of Detroit. We have dedicated staff and programming there. Environmental justice for me goes way, way back. I'm not going to say because I always don't like to talk about age. I heard it was rude to say how old you are or be asked how old you are. But I had a professor at the University of Michigan, Bunyan Bryant, who really is probably the father or one of the fathers of the modern environmental justice movement nationally. And the University of Michigan has a well-rooted connection to environmental justice due to his leadership there on this issue. But it was easy to really see that negative environmental impacts too often fall on communities of color, minority communities, and low-income communities. And that we believe, and I believe, that regardless of who you are, where you live, access to clean water, clean air, and clean land is a fundamental right, and that no communities should have to have a disproportionate share of the burden in that. And during my college days, we took a trip to Delray. And even then, decades ago, it was unbelievable that communities and the individuals there would have to live there under those conditions. And today in the three cities, communities of where Detroit, Dearborn, and River Rouge come together, it's amazing to see the number of families with young children living in areas that most of us would never want to live in due to the air quality and the soil contamination there. But they do. Detroit moved all of its heavy industry to that area, assuming that people would move out. But they didn't. When someone moved out, someone else moved in. And waves of communities have come into that area. And while the housing has been deteriorating and getting smaller, there's still significant number of families living there. And it's outrageous that we as a state don't have policies and rules and regulations that would protect that. But we don't. We take each permit application on its own. We don't look at cumulative impacts. So with the governors, I was appointed the Flint Water Advisory Task Force to look at Flint and what happened and why. One of the recommendations we made was that the state needed to reinvigorate its environmental justice action plan and to use Flint as an example, a learning lesson and training lesson to teach state employees how we could do better. And taking that, the governor created the Environmental Justice Task Force. 23 of us met. We came up with 33 recommendations and have put those forward to the governor, who is going to be announcing soon the implementation of those.
Hi, I'm Jeremy DeRoo, Executive Director of LINC Up, and we're a neighborhood revitalization organization. Kind of new to environmental space here. We believe that neighborhoods matter, that where you come from contributes to where you go in your life. And that as you look at why neighborhoods matter, it's because neighborhoods influence the people that live there. They help contribute to where people go in their lives. And so neighborhoods really provide a set of opportunities for the people that are living there. And so if you want to change neighborhoods, you have to change how neighborhoods work and how opportunities are available for folks. And as we've gotten into this work, a few things have become obvious. One is that you can't do this kind of place-based work without addressing race-based histories that contribute to the places that we have in this country. The other thing that we have really learned is that the opportunities of many families are limited from the time that they start raising their children because of the environmental conditions that exist in those communities. And so we work a lot in Southeast and Southwest Grand Rapids. And so neighborhoods like this where lead poisoning rates are very high, where asthma rates are very high, families that are living in this have limits and extra challenges that they're facing that are existing there before they move into the neighborhoods often, that they may not be aware of before they move in, but nonetheless they have to face and overcome. And so our work has increasingly started to work on addressing these systemic barriers that prevent all people from really thriving right here in West Michigan.
Yeah, thanks. So next question we have here. So the Governor's Environmental Justice Work Group and the work we did there, that was a pretty good attempt at a multi-stakeholder engagement process to try to move forward with this problem of environmental justice. So in light of a lot of the conversations we had and a lot of the issues we kind of grappled with, can you talk about the relationship between sustainable business and environmental justice and how there might be an interplay there? And we'll just start with you again, Anne Marie. I know your colleague was on the work group with us, so. You want to come down to the other end and work back?
I'll kick in, give Anne Marie a chance to mull. And I'll draw your attention to number 6. And another hat I've worn over the years as a champion for green chemistry. And, green chemistry isn't really something we talked about a lot in the work group because we mainly were talking about policy options. But to go back to your question, like what would I suggest is something in the realm of many people here? It's like, what actually are your processes? What chemicals flow through your processes? And what alternatives could you or should you have? The amount of toxicity that's generated by our society overall, we now just collectively know more what's good and bad than we used to know. And my work is primarily centered around looking at health disparities, where there are concentrations of people who are suffering all wide assortments of health ailments, from birth defects, cancers, asthma, infertility, reduced IQ, and things like this, that today, not just in America, but globally, we know better. We know better, and people in rooms like this, we have the obligation to push the envelope of that knowledge and understanding. If not people in here, it's not ever going to happen. So, that's my main point and what drove me to participate and drive the solutions we try to work out in the work group, is that, and simply stated, we have the knowledge to do better and be more protective of our workers, of our customers who use our products, of anybody living near the facilities, even the modes of transportation to move our product and activate our whole commercial enterprises in America. That is the bottom line, is that we need to think sustainably, but not just about energy, but also about toxicity.
For me, the way I look at it, we are all living during some exciting times. There's so much going on. There's so much new technology that's coming in, and we are constantly talking about development. Without further development, we obviously cannot improve our lot, right? Of ourselves, of the other people. So we live in a very, very exciting time. Now, as we live in this exciting time, and as we look at bringing in new technology, as we look at development, the question that we always wrestle with, which is, where should we draw the line? I mean, when we bring in a technology, do we pause and consider what is going to be the impact of that technology on people? And as we look at the impact analysis, as we look at how not only that technology is going to help us alleviate some of the pain that is caused right now because of not thinking through all of that, especially with the marginalized communities, what can we do to ensure that by having the right processes, by having the right questions, we can build for the future. So the work that we did, in a way, in a nutshell, the work that was done by the EJ group was to look at providing some kind of tool or tools or resources to the state, to the businesses who are all interested in improving the overall well-being of the communities, but do it in a way that you know where you can draw the line, where the state can understand who needs to be taught, what they need to be taught so that they can do a better job, where we can teach people who are going to be impacted as to how should they approach it, who are the right people to go voice their concern. So those are the kind of things, the framework, making sure that those tools and resources are available to all these different stakeholders, the businesses like you, the impacted people, the state and the local agencies, so that we can all partner together, we can all work together to develop in such a way that takes care of this so-called perception of discrimination and also the actual discrimination that takes place.
As quick as I can, because I think a lot of good points have been made. I think is number one, we've known about the impacts that our business decisions have been, having for decades. We just weren't required to do anything about it. So I think, some of the things that happened, I think here in West Michigan was one of the real footholds of looking internally on sustainability. What was the waste we were creating? How could we eliminate it? And focused internally. Then, as Guy mentioned, it's really going to sustainable, supply chain, so that it goes not just from the internal, but to the external. Who are all the companies and suppliers you're working for? What are they doing in all these efforts? We've seen examples of this, like Switch demanding to be 100% renewable energy, demanding that these things, if we're going to be in your community, in your state, you have to supply us this. We lost out on a big American Express facility in Southeast Michigan because we did not have enough carbon reduction policies here in the state of Michigan. But then I think going to the last presentation right before we came up, it's that engagement of communities, going out, seeing what's happening in our communities. I think one of the most meaningful things we did on the task force was to go do a tour and listening session in Detroit, Grand Rapids, and Traverse City, as well as a presentation from Central Michigan area as well, but to go out and see it for yourselves. See what folks in your communities are living with and having a responsibility and ownership of being involved with them, engaging with them to find solutions. Business does not end at the budget sheet, the balance sheet. There's a moral responsibility to do more, to be part of the community. And you cannot be part of the community unless you're engaging in that community. So I just say, it's great that we're doing things internally and the supply chain. We now need to go to the next level and make sure we're engaging on a really social level that brings racial and environmental equity to the table as well.
Sure. So I think the question is kind of where's the overlap between business sustainability and environmental justice issues. And I think there's the heart of business sustainability to me is asking the question of kind of what else is going on here, right? Businesses are more than a balance sheet. They also have impacts on the space in which they're located, and taking responsibility and looking around, what am I doing to make sure that I leave this community, the environment where I am, a better place when we came from. And I think what environmental justice urges us to do is also ask the question of for whom? Who is benefiting from my business? And how do we make sure that we are not perpetuating to a racialized history of our country by only benefiting one segment of our population, but really asking ourselves and taking the time to understand how we are ensuring that all people benefit from the work that our businesses are doing. And so there's a lot of overlap in terms of the process and philosophy that goes into understanding fully what it is that our businesses are doing to contribute to a community, both socially and physically in that space.
Thanks for buying me some time, guys. Two things that I think of. One, who is the most impacted, right? When we're talking about something like a racial equity impact assessment, or we're talking about social equity work and your triple bottom line, It's not just, who you can figure out is impacted. You want to really spend time to find out who is the most impacted. Because once we can't move forward as a community without addressing that as well. And really targeting being intentional about targeting ways to work alongside the most impacted of our community members. The other piece is that y'all are champions of culture change. And that's exactly the kind of culture change that things like inclusion principles and organizations need. How long ago was it that a lot of the groups that are represented in this room were the pioneers of sustainable business and sustainable business change internally? Those same principles need to be used internally as we talk about inclusion in the workplace, being able to provide those opportunities for professional development, upward mobility, pipeline development, all these kinds of great things. Diversifying our culture is necessary to understand we need to have a difference of opinions, right? I mean, we understand the value of diversity. This is also about holding space to decenter the whiteness and leadership of your community and of your business. So what does it mean to not just ask people of color to come into your business, but what does it mean to also not ask them to assimilate to what you find as values, right? So opening up, finding those ways into your business, I think is also very an opportunity that our sustainable business leaders have.
Okay, great, thank you. So the next question might put you on the spot a little bit, so we'll soften it a bit. So what I'm interested in is if you can identify a business or organization that actually gets it right, and talk about what they're doing and what you appreciate most about what they're doing. And if you maybe can't identify a business, maybe talk about elements that you would think would be in a strategy that would get it right. So I don't want to put you on the spot again, Anne Marie. So
Yeah, okay.
does anybody else want to jump? Okay.
Chad knows me better. He knows I can talk a lot. Briefly, I do think that certifications like B Corp are good examples of how you can achieve better equity work. Having those kind of certifications and accountability. Also having the opportunity to network with other leaders across the country. The Sustainable Business Forum here is very rich and awesome, but there's a lot of champions across the country and across the world that we can also look to for practices. So I do like those certifications a lot. I think some of the better examples that I've seen are typically social enterprise businesses. So places like farms that help train workers who are, maybe reentry citizens, and then what does it look like to sell that food at a really awesome market, right? So we kind of see that you don't have to become an environmental justice social enterprise to do the work, but there are certainly examples of communities, even I think you witnessed one during the Toxic Tour. If you go to Detroit, everyone should do that. So I'll keep that brief. But.
Okay, I can speak to some of the work that Amway is doing. So Amway, as you know, especially our nutritional products, we call that C2 supplement. So we have our own farms in different parts of the country as well as outside the country. And we make sure that we always have these principles in mind, and that when it comes to ensuring that there's no contamination of the land, making sure that we keep, the landfills are kept to a minimum. So most of our manufacturing plants based here in Ada, by 2020, we're going to make sure that the very little landfill issue that we have today is no longer there. So we've made huge progress, and if Eric was here, Eric is part of this forum. If Eric was here, he obviously would have been able to talk more about that. We also got a Safer Choice Award in 2017 for manufacturing practices that keep some of these principles in mind from EPA. So there was also something that Amway over the past so many years is very close to our heart. We want to make sure that there's no contamination. Our buildings try and conserve energy to the maximum possible extent. As you know, we operate in 100 different countries, and it's not just a US-based initiative. It's an initiative that we are very proud that globally we follow or apply the same principles everywhere. So those are some of the things that we are very proud of as far as Amway is concerned. Outside of that, the very little I know, if you ask me, I would say Pepsi, Coke, these are some of the other organizations who really look at it from the point of view of not only growing their business, but also growing their business in a very responsible way, like Jeremy was talking about. So those are great examples of what organizations are doing by creating that visibility of how important some of these initiatives are at the board level, at an investor level, at the stakeholder level, because they do understand the importance of doing it right.
Well, let me turn it off. A couple things that come to mind for me, it's not necessarily a company, but more I have experience working in business sectors. And it's always been noteworthy to me since my earliest time in this work that the furniture manufacturers here in this region have a reputation for really pushing the edge around pollution prevention, for example, waste minimization, reusing scraps into your feedstock, and that kind of thing. So to me, that sets a tone that actually there are principles operating there that can be applicable to the greater society at large. And what may be a next role I would encourage folks to take a step up is to really look at yourself through the lens of being a global citizen. And in that way, take on a responsibility to promote what you know is working well. And maybe that's a little bit against capitalism to promote your edge, but I think in the theme that we're after here is that we have still, by and large, an industrial society that generates and uses a lot of chemicals and pushes out a lot of waste that's harmful of all kinds. So I would implore you that if you're involved in one of these initiatives that you think is getting it right, you have an obligation to really share that news, share that energy. And my friend Bill Stahl here, I feel is one of my mentors in learning how you can do that through associations, through conferences outside of West Michigan, and things of the like. And we try to do the same thing in our world by taking our best practices that we are aware of and circulating them widely. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Cool. I already dropped Switch, I'm a name dropper. I love to do that, but as Guy said, it's nice going after you, Guy. I'm still case Herman Miller. Definitely we're seen as pioneers in this area, and Peter Wege and his influence in this community is huge. To looking at some other examples who you might not think I would say, but DTE. It was about a year ago that Jerry Anderson, the CEO, framed why they were moving into renewable energy because of climate change. First time I know in my history here in Michigan that a utility provider was really talking about climate change. To Consumer Energies, recently filed an integrated resource plan that says that they will produce electricity, 43% of their electricity will come from renewable energy by 2040, and that their carbon reduction will be over 80% by then. Huge commitments. Now, I have to make sure they hold up to that. But they really are starting to do it, and I'll look at, both of them. DTE is investing in its surrounding communities in Detroit. It's reaching out to schools who do not have the resources to have really skilled trades, folks, to giving those kids an opportunity, opening up its internship to making sure that kids, young people from impacted communities have opportunities there. They have to actively go out and recruit, to having opportunities for workers to go out and make improvements in those communities. Sandra, my employee in Detroit, we had a cleanup day down in Denby High School area. I think it's a neighborhood that those DTE employees had probably never seen before. But it gave them an opportunity to give back to the community and open their eyes what others live with. So I think there are lots of examples to things like Michigan, to energy options here, to really implementing the things I work for on policy, to seeing it implemented throughout our community. So there's lots of great things going on out there, but they all involve having, you know, the commitment to do it. It's one thing to say we're going to do it. It's another to appoint someone to do it, to give them the resources and the ability to do it that makes it all successful.
To a smaller scale level, I guess, here locally, I think if I think of a business that's getting it right, I think of kind of a Brewery Vivant organization that kind of rooted in the neighborhood here, that has paid attention from the start to how they're recycling, how they're using energy, solar panels and stuff installed in place, but also looking at the neighborhood and the environment in which they're in, and kind of adopting an elementary school that's near the brewery, right? And a brewery in an elementary school makes an odd marketing strategy. But it really is about kind of strengthening the neighborhood in which they're working and recognizing that what they do is connected to a place, and what happens and is important to that place is important to their business, and that those things are connected, and that true sustainability means that both things have to prosper together. And I think that's been part of their business philosophy from the start, and I think is a great example of what, no matter what size business you can be, you can really implement these philosophies and these values as you're doing your work.
Thanks. And Guy, did you have a follow-up point?
I think all my folks back home would be really disappointed if I just said everything nice while I was up here. I want to point out that particularly when we're working at scale, we're planning a big event of our own next month, and there was conversation about awards and who and what awards there should be and who should get them. And one person said, what about General Motors? And another said, what about DTE? And both of these are companies that are part of our active Detroit Climate Action Collaborative, and they've been very good partners. In fact, DTE hosted most of the work group meetings for businesses and institutions. On the other hand, my hair will be white as snow before I ever ask DTE Foundation for a grant. And you might, well, why is that? Because of all the cool stuff Chris just mentioned. Well, in addition to the cool stuff that Chris just mentioned, you may not know how, on the one hand, they also have made it super tough for the expansion of solar energy and the diversification and resilience at a neighborhood level that the current energy bill allows. You might not know that the really cool solar system or solar panel array they built on the west side of Detroit was a knockoff copy of a community-based idea where they took that idea, plopped down an array that they own, and effectively won over the mayor to their model. So the mayor's like, oh, it's that easy? We can get solar panels in Detroit just by you plopping them down? Yes, that is true. What's also true is that without DTE's very strong cooperation, there can never be something commensurate developed by the private sector who's not part of DTE that could be generated by local entrepreneurs and creating neighborhood scale solar resiliency. So there's a yin and yang going on here in my movement where it's tough to praise the largest corporations because usually if you look closely enough, you find something they're doing that you flat out find is really shitty. And so, you know, my point is raising all that is to not say that the good shouldn't happen and not to be overly chastising and discourage you, but to just be real. We're trying to put our arms around really complex problems here. And the more real we get, the more likely we're going to be to getting better solutions. So yes, I want DTE and General Motors at the table when we're talking about these things so we can say that to them. And we do. So, you know, I'm not quite sure what I expect out of this audience, but I just want you to know that there's a yin and yang going on, that being at the forefront of the transformation of our economy, which is what I feel groups like this represent, we have to work harder. We can't just rest on our laurels because we did one cool thing. We've got to look deeper. What's like the whole life cycle of what we have going on here and how we go about it? We've got to do better.
Thanks, Guy. So I just wanted to kind of recap a few themes I heard in what makes a good strategy. And it seems like getting outside of your organization is a pretty key point in giving back to the community. And I think you maybe highlighted it too, Guy, doing the right things for the right reasons. And I also think that your follow-up point especially kind of highlights the challenges. You know, we have these already established interests, and we're trying to change how they operate. And they're trying to change how they operate too. But we have these established interests in our economy. So I think there's a lot of challenges to fully realizing the promise of environmental justice. So I think we have some time for questions. In the back, yeah, thumbs up, okay. Does anyone have a question? Just raise your hand and right there. You're gonna have to stand up right here. Yep, blue shirt. Yep.
Lionel.
If you have a question or not, you have to ask one now. Does anyone want to take that?
Everybody's looking at me because I'm the loudmouth, but I'll go first so Chris can take shots at me a little bit if he feels like it, or my line of reasoning. Great question, Lionel. Yes, the budget is a very important consideration. I mean, in just a straight out sense that the state budget reflects the state values, basically. We put our money where our mouth is. And so my experience politically is that the budget over the last 15 years has continued to shrink in the effective amount of money available for issues of concern to myself and my constituents. Everything from the actual budget of the primary regulatory agency, the loss of staffing, a few different rounds of major cutbacks that lost a lot of institutional experience in that regulatory body. These things have really hurt. But to bring it down to something more of a smaller scale campaign that we did work for with modest success, more funding to deal with underground contamination. I mean, the reason I got involved working with the LINC organization is because of groundwater or underground contamination that caused evacuations in Grand Rapids. And I was asked if I could help as a technical expert. And to make a long story short, what we found about what's the technical term of the vapor intrusions is that this is not expected to be an isolated situation. There are many situations just waiting to happen like this in Kent County alone. And the amount of money that's been allocated for the departments to search out the issues, clean up the issues, deal with the health impacts where people have been exposed are nowhere near what's necessary. So this is like a political will issue. So we're trying to educate the public, which actually goes back to number 16, you all being part of the public, to just let you know, when you talk to your elected officials, your state legislators, tell them we need more than $2 million to deal with underground contamination for the whole freaking state. I mean, you know, just get real, people. And how we got this way is because we knew better 20 years ago when we started rolling out the new brownfield laws and we set them up. We just kicked the can down the road. Sooner or later, all this stuff is going to come up and bite us in the ass. And now it is. It's just beginning. So yeah, if we don't allocate more, like hundreds of millions of dollars to this, it's really going to hurt the state. And it doesn't care really what party you're in or who's living above it. The poisons are the poisons.
Kaushik, did you have a comment you wanted to?
Yes. So Guy makes a very important point, which is what is it that we can do? So obviously we all have a wish list. If we have more budget, if we have better funding, then obviously a lot of these issues can be taken care of. But I would consider that to be part of wish list, and let's make sure that those wishes come true and we do everything within our power to ensure that from a policy point of view, from the voice point of view, we're doing everything to push the officials, the government officials and the different administrations to make that happen. However, as we all know, there are different stakeholders in this entire process, right? So we have public, which is what Guy was talking about, educating the public, making sure that they all understand their rights, they are doing everything that they can do. And then businesses. How do we make sure that from a business perspective, we understand that not doing anything on these issues is no longer an option. It's a business imperative, right? In the short term, obviously someone's balance sheet can improve because you can only look at it from that point of view. But we live in a competitive world. If we ignored something that impacted a lot of people, obviously that's going to come back and bite us at a later point. We will run into PR issues. Our reputation might suffer as a business because we didn't do it right. And as a result of that, if we may even go out of business if we are not being good stewards of things like that. So I think from a business point of view, as you talk about advocacy, urging the business owners and other peers and other people, making sure that they all understand how this can be seen as a business imperative and how you can actually increase your market share by doing things right. So that's what I'd like to say.
Just from the Environmental Justice Task Force report, we did recommend that we increase funding for compliance assistance and enforcement of environmental laws. I mean, as Guy pointed out, it's been actually, if I add my math right, about 28 years of divesting out of environmental management here at the state of Michigan. Started with John Engler, who divided up the DNR into permitting and all that warm, fuzzy stuff over here of forests and state parks and things people love. And they started to defund the compliance and permitting section, taking out general fund dollars. So it all has to be raised by permit fees. Well, of course, do you really want your permit fees to be increased, knowing that it'd be really tough to do that? Laying on top of this small government movement of now and Republican primaries not being able to vote for any increase, whether it be a general tax or permit fees, being all that's being taboo, we really have divested out of environmental compliance, and we need to really start. We have over 3,000 contaminated, abandoned, orphaned contamination sites here in the state of Michigan. 3,000 of them. No one to pay for them. So we're working to get more money into that, and the governor has put forward a proposal to do that by raising tipping fees. Whether that will be the mechanism or not, we're yet to see. But we have 7,000 abandoned and orphaned underground storage tanks, I do believe is about the number here, that need to be cleaned up. But we do have a funding mechanism for that. But we have a huge legacy of environmental contamination with no ownership. It's going to be up to the state, to us, to help fund that, to clean that up. Many of those sites won't take a lot, but there'll be a good 10% or more who are going to need immediate cleanup, and another 10% or more who are going to need some sort of moderate cleanup. So we are going to need to triage this, go for the ones that need the most work, then the next, and work our way down. But we have a huge, cleanup problem here in the state of Michigan, just being an old industrial Rust Belt state. And we have an obligation for that, because what we don't see does harm us. That is the vapor intrusion problem. That is the contamination of drinking water, whether it's PFAS, whether it's, in my community, 1,4-dioxane. It doesn't matter. If we don't take care of it, it will come back to bite us. And you can either pay me now today, or you can pay me a hell of a lot more in the future. And the difference is, it's not just financial. It's health. It's quality of life. It's about impacting our children and our grandchildren. It's time for Michigan to step up and do the right thing.
Anne-Marie, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just briefly, groups like Michigan Environmental Council and the group I'm with, Michigan League of Conservation Voters, we can make this stuff really easy for you, accessible. Policy can be overwhelming. Sometimes it moves quickly. Fortunately, this is our full-time jobs. So don't be shy reaching out to environmental policy advocates if you're interested in actually participating in things in Lansing or in DC. Because we are available and accessible to make that achievable and accessible for you as well.
Okay. I think we're running short on time. Do we have time for one more question? Okay, we'll do one more question from the audience. Right here. Okay, well, how about gerrymandering or polarized politics as an environmental justice issue? Can you just quickly speak to that? Final words.
I'll just go really quick. We just did endorse, my organization, Michigan Environmental Council, just endorsed the Voters Not Politicians redistricting ballot proposal that, outside of a real curveball from the Michigan Supreme Court, will be on the ballot. So I think that's something to go at the makeup of the legislature. But I'm a former legislator. I served 6 years in the Michigan House from one of the most liberal areas in the state, Ann Arbor, and yet I was able to work across the aisle. It's being able to connect to people where they're at, what resonates with them about these issues. So we know in Michigan that water's huge. Everyone here in Michigan cares about water. So we can start framing our issues around water and how it impacts them. But you got to get them out into the community as well. You know, two of our leaders, the Speaker of the House and the House Minority Leader, they exchanged weekends. They went down to each other's community and realized that they had a lot in common in Detroit and in northern Michigan. The conditions of what they were working on were really the same. They just were framed differently. When you can bring a commonality to an issue, when you can reach out and talk to someone at where they're at, that's where solutions begin. But you can't wait for someone to come to you, which is the big lesson I learned in the legislature. I had to go to them, and I had to do the outreach, and I had to do the listening, because I had to figure out how I could talk about my issues, which I knew they cared about, in a way that they would hear. And so how we frame issues, how we do our outreach and engagement is extremely important. They are state legislators. They are not an Ann Arbor legislator or a Grand Rapids legislators. They are state legislators, and they need to look at that. Our ultimate bosses are you, are the voters. Those who show up and vote matter most. And so we need to get out there and vote, and hopefully we'll have an ability to vote on something that will change how we draw up districts here in the state of Michigan and make for a much more balanced legislature, which I think then will reflect the policies that the vast majority of Michiganders really support. So.
Any other comments from the panel on that? Seeing no heads nod, guys not grabbing the microphone?
Yeah, let me have the last word, fine.
Yeah, right. Okay, I think that's the end of our discussion today. I want to thank your group again for having us all, and I want to mention, since I'm at the mic, that you should come to my conference in September if you want to continue to talk about sustainability. On your table, there's little flyers. So let's thank our panel for their time today. Okay, thank you.